The blaring of my cell phone jolted me awake, and I sat up with a groan. Getting too old for this. In front of my ragged couch, the TV continued with its black and white parade of old footage from a World War I documentary, though the war seemed nearly over now. Judging by the digital clock on the mantelpiece, which read 3:49 a.m., I'd been asleep for at least 5 hours. My body ached, a familiar problem at my age, but enough that I chided myself for not going to bed earlier like a responsible person. It had been a long day, so I came home to a cold shower, a few hot dogs warmed in the microwave, and settled down to watch some television before bed. Of course, at 55 years old, I'd misjudged how tired I really was, and spent close to half the night slumped on my sofa, which meant I would be paying for it in the morning with stiff joints and a sore back. Palming my cracked Motorola from the coffee table, I found the TV remote and hit the mute button as I answered the call. "Hello?" Shaky breathing grated on the other end, and after a few moments, a girl's hushed voice whispered through. "Mr. Todd?" Ice rippled through my veins at the sound of Cindy's panicked voice, and I sat up straighter to rub at my bleary eyes. "Yeah, I'm here. You okay? What's wrong?" Silence greeted me, a strange mix of static, trembling breaths, and what sounded like sniffles as she tried to hold back tears. "Please, help me." "Cindy?" Concern building in my mind, I switched on a nearby lamp and pulled myself from the couch with a grunt at the tightness in my lower back. "You there? What's going on?" More shaky gasps followed, and just over the static, I thought I heard the faint sound of melodic humming in the background. "Something's wrong," Cindy whispered, her words so quiet that they made each breath sound like cannon fire. "The woods are... Something fell out of the sky and it was so loud it woke me up. There's a fire." Brow furrowed, I moved fast for the kitchen, stumbling through the dark interior of my little cabin to grope for the light switch. "Stay calm. Just stay calm and talk to me. You said there's a fire? How far away? Can you get to your car?" Another sniffle came through, clogged with harsh interference as the signal weakened, a sound that made my veins throb with tension. I can't. Something's here. It's in the house. It's in the house with me. We can't get out." My throat tried to close up, and I gulped hard against a wave of nausea. "Someone broke in? Are you hurt? Where's Aaron?" A long pause, and in the background of the mute static, I could have sworn the humming sound cut out, as though whoever it was stopped their eerie melody all at once. "She's gone." Something in Cindy's tone changed, as if the fear drained away to a blank, emotionless rasp, and the line went dead with a chilling click. Every inch of my body racked with a shiver, and both feet seemed glued to the floor in a strange form of dread. Like so many girls before them, Cindy Fadro and Erin Martinelli had been hired on to be caretakers and actors in the Wickenshire Living History estate. Erin was 19, studying to be a nurse, while Cindy had just graduated high school and wanted to be a teacher. They were good kids, calm, intelligent, and great workers. Though I never had any children, they were like daughters of my own, and they even baked a cake for my birthday in June. Once they called me in for a leaky pipe, but only after they had done their best to fix it themselves with a toolkit I'd left in the stairwell cupboard. Smart little troopers that they were. The girls even had the common sense to shut the correct valve off and found the leak on their own. Had it been anyone else, I might have considered this to be a prank, a joke, some dumb idea made by bored kids to get a new video for their social media nonsense. But I knew Cindy and Erin. They didn't pull pranks like this. Unnerved, I tried to redial her number but got no answer. Erin's number yielded the same result, and I shook my head at myself. Screw it, I'm not taking any chances. I was midway through yanking my work boots on when the sheriff picked up. "Hello?" From the gruffness in his words, I could tell he'd been asleep as well, but I couldn't waste time with the standard 911 procedures. "David, it's me." I cinched down the laces on my boots and grabbed my Carhartt jacket from its hook by the door. "Cindy just called from the Wickenshire place. There's a fire on the mountain and I think someone's broken into the house. I'm headed there now." Rustling on the opposite end of the phone let me know David was up, likely going through the same motions as myself. The son of a Polish man and a Kordenat woman, David Kowalski and I had known each other since high school and even played football on the same team. Nicknamed White Cloud for his European features and Native American blood, he was stubborn with a quick temper, but tenacious when it came to his job. As a lawman, he drove his deputies relentlessly, backed them to the hilt when it came to any court battles, and as a result, he'd managed to keep the crime in Jacob's Fork quite low over the years. We didn't always see eye to eye on everything, but I knew I could count on him when it came to something like this. If Cindy or Aaron were in danger, Sheriff Kowalski would ride through hell and back to get them out, which was exactly the kind of man I needed right now. "I'll get on the horn to a few of my boys and have them meet you there," he replied, and I heard the zipping of a coat on his end, along with the metallic cha-click of a handgun slide being racked. "Fire teams are going to need time to get spun up, so whatever happens, don't go wandering off without letting me know. Last thing I want is us getting caught in the flames if they decide to move down the mountain." I nodded, then remembered he couldn't see me and kept the phone pressed to my ear as I swiped my truck keys from the porcelain ashtray near the front door. "Got it." "Be careful, Andy." His voice hitched in a low pause, as if the sheriff himself had as bad a feeling about this as I did, and he hung up. Rain pattered on the windshield of my ancient pickup truck as I wound my way through the dark back roads of northern Idaho, the night sky black with the clouds of late fall. On the sun-faded seat next to me lay my work kit, a simple heavy-duty canvas tool bag that held various tools, keys, a flashlight, and an old revolver handed down to me from my grandfather. I used the tools in my job every day as the groundskeeper, janitor, and fix-it-all handyman for the Wickenshire house, which had been part of our small town for as long as anyone could remember, set on a picturesque 103 acres of fields and woodland in the shadow of the nearby Smoke Point Mountain. The Wickenshire house was a rare example of Eastern architecture in the far reaches of the American West. It was the property of our town's oldest resident, Mr. Edward J. Watkins, a kindly if forgetful soul who'd seen 91 years on this earth and still could drive his own car, though he had a little trouble with stairs. He lived in a cottage on the western edge of town, but I wasn't about to call him at this time of night, even for something so urgent. Knowing Ed Watkins, he would try to drive out to the house with his slippers on and get hurt stumbling around in the flames. Or run into whatever scumbag is in the house, God forbid. On the horizon, some of the clouds began to glow, an orange flicker that widened on the mountainside as the distant fire spread. I could barely glimpse an odd plume of smoke in the sky, not curved upward from the fire, but downward in a long arc, backlit by the flames. Looking at it, I had a momentary lapse of courage, my resolve wavering. Cindy had said something fell from the sky. This looked like a trail of some kind, maybe a crashed plane or a fallen weather balloon. If there was jet fuel on the ground, the fire would be even worse to put out than usual. It was horrible, rotten luck all the way around. A wildfire on the same night the house had its first break-in, while the girls were there alone. Adrenaline pumping, I sped up the lonely gravel trail to the house, one of the final sections of public roadways that got this close to the mountain. The Wickenshire house reared from the gloom ahead, its tall gates and Victorian gables illuminated by the dual halos of my truck's headlights. It still took my breath away, the ornate beauty of the place, built as if every stone had been placed by a perfectionist's hand. It stood at 2 stories in height, built from stone mined at the local quarry, with multiple chimneys, a balcony overlooking the back garden, and a grand front porch that wrapped halfway around the entire structure. A stone wall encircled the main grounds, with a wrought iron gate at the drive and several ornamental gardens interspersed throughout. Plush lawns stretched in between, and there were a few oak trees planted there for their brilliant colors in the fall. A small garage had been built around the back of the house sometime in the 1960s, but this mainly held the riding lawn mower and a small shop where I did most of my repair work. Cindy and Aaron's cars were parked back there, the front gravel lot reserved for visitors during the daily tours. I didn't see any other vehicle that the intruder might have used, but something else caught my attention in that moment, and held it with a pull like gravity. Lord have mercy. I stared, slack-jawed, at a huge sea of flames that roared through the nearby trees with a voracious appetite. The fire hadn't wasted any time, chewing through the wet growth as if the rain had never fell, evergreens crackling as they burned to dust in minutes. The heat came through my windshield in a steady increase, warm enough that I couldn't tell the difference between the fire and my truck heater. The open grassy slopes around the house were consumed as the flames inched closer to the building, and fire closed in from both east and west. Bounding from my truck, I dashed up to the front door and pulled the handles. The polished brass knobs rattled but didn't turn, the flames licking their way across the prairie grass outside the ornate courtyard walls. Locked. That means our scumbag didn't break in through here. Maybe he went around the back. With shaking hands, I put down the canvas tool bag and dug in it for my keyring. Sirens began to wail in the distance, and I finally managed to force the doors open, leaving the keys in the lock to snatch my aged pistol. "Cindy!" I produced a flashlight with my left hand to hold it beneath my gun and swept the beam of it over the murky interior. "Aaron, where are you?" I'd been in the house countless times over the years, but in that moment it felt suffocating, like a great stony maw waiting for me to go far enough in so as to swallow me whole. The foyer led to a large room with a grand staircase, doorways on either side opening to the main dining room and a sitting room, respectively. Signs and velvet ropes were posted to guide visitors through the proper areas. A gift shop in the rear of the house near the old parlor, along with guest bathrooms added on to the original back porch. With all the lights off, it looked alien, surreal for this part of the country, with its Eastern Victorian mystique, and my skin prickled at the sensation that there were eyes in every shadow. Of course, I had been stupid to yell. I'd let my panic get the better of me, and now I had given away the element of surprise. If some creep was in the house somewhere with Aaron or Cindy doing God knows what, I wouldn't be able to sneak up on him now. All right then, might as well move fast. With the old revolver grasped in my trembling hands, I headed for the stairs and took them 3 at a time. The wood creaked under my steps, ancient chestnut and oak that had been sawn before the Great Depression, each footfall like a cannon in the silent house. From here, the roar of the fire outside seemed a muffled whisper, as though there were 2 different realities, and the house stood guard between them. However, I remembered the heat coming through the windshield of my pickup and knew I didn't have much time. Soon the house would be in flames, the fire outside enough to melt glass and ignite the wooden siding in minutes. I reached the top of the stairs and swept my flashlight beam down both ends of the corridor at the top, uncertain of which direction to go first. Cindy and Aaron were roomed down the hall to the left, but if someone had indeed broken into the house, Cindy might have hid somewhere else. Every second wasted could mean life or death, and I realized that either way, I'd be turning my back to the unknown. Something flickered in the beam of my light, a brief wisp of shadow that jerked back behind the far corner of the right side hallway. I didn't have more than a moment to see clear details, but there was enough of an image burned into my mind that it came to me in a cold rush. A face. "Kowalski, you'd better get here soon." Swallowing, I paced down the hallway, my handgun leveled on the spot where the shadow had been. Upon reaching it, I inched in a wide arc around the corner, bracing for a figure to jump out at me. The air caught in my throat, and I stared at a section of wallpaper bathed in the aura of my flashlight. Brownish black sludge had been daubed on the wall, smeared into a perfect circle so that the excess dripped over the wallpaper like ebony tears. I couldn't tell if it was mud, blood, or something else, but the corridor stank of rot and the putrid scent of stagnant water. Thorny bits of twig had been woven together, tied here and there with bits of plant fiber to form a circle that overlaid the sludge. Pasted together on the wall, these seemed to make up a protective ring, and in the middle were the handprints. From what I could see, they were 2 different sizes, slender fingers and narrow palms, indicating 2 younger females. Both prints faced downwards, slightly overlapping each other at the heel of the palm, and the thumbs arced toward one another like pincers. Unlike the grimy sludge, these were pressed to the old wallpaper in an unmistakable red hue, and it hit me what I was looking at: a spider. The 4 fingers of each hand made the legs, the thumbs its mandibles. Upon closer inspection, I discovered the blackness of the outer paste came from petals. Rose petals, to be exact. There were no roses growing in Idaho this time of year, and I'd never seen a natural black rose in my life. Yet these appeared fresh. Most had been ground to a powder that gave the foul substance its dark color. Others pushed into the muck like decorative flair, giving a strange, heady undertone to the mixture. With this discovery came more clarity. The thorny twigs glued into the circle were not random. They spread inward toward the spider, forming a sharp web of spikes that enshrined it, with the careful touch of an artisan. Such a display would have taken hours to make, certainly longer than the time it took for Cindy to call me. How was this possible? "Mr. Todd!" I nearly jumped out of my skin, the horrific cry echoing from somewhere behind me. Cindy's voice tinged in pain and fear. No sooner had I turned, running a short distance back toward the main corridor at the top of the stairs, and the voice cut out with a high, agonized scream. "Cindy!" I charged toward the girl's rooms, heart pounding in my chest. "Help me!" Back in the direction of the symbol, Erin's voice rang out, choked with sobs and full of torment. "Mr. Todd, please!" Acidic bewilderment slithered through my mind, and I skidded to a stop, caught in the middle of the hallway, the staircase just to my left. I had been so close, perhaps a door away from Erin only moments ago. Could there be more than one intruder holding the girls in separate rooms? Cindy is closest. I have to get to her. She sounds like she's hurt. Teeth gritted against the screams of Erin, I forced myself through the left side hallway, her voice ringing in my ears as she begged for my help. At the end of the hall, I reached the rooms given to the girls and lunged for the handle to Cindy's. It didn't turn, locked from the inside. Backing up, I drove the heel of my boot into the door next to the lock and heard the old wood splinter. Any other time I would have balked at such destruction, these doors being over 80 years old, but it didn't matter anymore. What the fire didn't get would not be worth Cindy or Erin's lives. The door swung open to slap against the bedroom wall, and I dashed inside, revolver in hand. What the? Within the quiet interior of the bedroom, everything looked untouched, the curtains partially open. The bed rumpled from where Cindy had gotten up to check the window, a discarded work uniform in the clothes hamper by the door. Dark stained wood trim lined the walls, windows, and doorway. The walls papered with a robin egg blue pattern that gave it an airy feeling. The white lacy curtains wafted like clouds in the slight draft that came in the open hallway door, and the vintage hot water heater gurgled in the corner as steam worked its way through the pipes. There were modern touches as well, more lamps and lights plugged into the discrete electrical outlets in the walls. A small television on its stand across from the bed, and a side door opened to a shared bathroom between Cindy's room and Erin's. This room wasn't open to tourists, as it was the private living quarters for our workers, so such things were permissible here, as opposed to other parts of the house. Nothing seemed out of place, but there was no sign of Cindy anywhere, no clues to indicate that she'd been there moments ago. It was as if she'd gotten out of bed, looked out the window, and vanished into thin air. In a flurry of movement, I checked under the bed, in the closet, and the bathroom. When those came back clean, I broke through the bathroom door into Erin's room, only to find more of the same. There was no sign of the girls anywhere. "Mr. Todd, please!" Erin's screams continued from the opposite end of the long corridor, and I flung open the bedroom door to retrace my mad dash in her direction, confusion and frustration mounting. Rounding the corner that bore the strange mark on the wall, I swayed to a stop on the old floorboards next to the door, where her screams had come from, and yanked on the knob. "You've got to be kidding me. How many doors did they lock before I got here?" With a gasp of exertion, I backed up to kick the door in like the last one, muscles tensed for the effort. "Mr. Todd!" Cindy's cries exploded from the doorway behind me, rabid and intense as the door rattles on its hinges like she was throwing herself against it from within the room. I froze, staring at the door, heart racing as my mind whirled. How could she be in there? I'd heard Cindy on the other side of the house not 5 minutes ago. There was no way she could have moved that fast, not without going past me. I would have seen her in the hall, would have heard the ancient doors creaking on their hinges as they opened. She couldn't be in there. "Please help me!" Erin's screams started up again, but this time from somewhere in the left side hallway, and another door began to groan in muted thuds, as if she too were trying to break it down. A dry fear crept into my throat, different than what I'd known coming into the house. This didn't make sense. Erin's voice had been coming from the door I stood ready to break into, but now it was to my left. Cindy's had been coming from her room in the west wing, but now called from the door behind me. Neither could have left their respective rooms without entering the hall, and I knew for a fact that there weren't any old-fashioned servant entrances anywhere that could have let them move unnoticed. Something was wrong, very wrong. Shaken, I took a step away from the door that echoed with Cindy's voice. "Cindy? Mr. Todd," she begged from the other side of the oak planking, the wood slamming against the jamb with wild urgency. "Please help me, please!" "The door is locked." I tried not to hyperventilate as I watched the knob rattle in its socket, knowing fully well the lock was on her side of the door. "Can you let me in?" Her wails increased in pitch. The screeches an awful combination of agony and terror that made my stomach churn. It sounded as if Cindy was being tormented in the worst ways imaginable, but something about the cadence of each shriek felt off, enough that my brain sent up warning alarms inside my skull. "Mr. Todd, please!" she pleaded once more, the same words both girls kept using in various rearrangements over and over, the door shuddering under each blow she made. Sweat beaded on my forehead, and I sucked in a breath, eyes focused on the doorknob as it clacked back and forth, like Cindy wanted to open it but couldn't. An uncanny thought rose in my mind, bone-chilling in its clarity, growing louder and louder so that it burst from me before I could stop it. "Cindy?" I gripped my flashlight so hard that my knuckles turned white. "What's my first name?" Like a thunderclap, Cindy's pleas ceased, along with Erin's, so that the entire house fell into dead silence. Nothing moved, and even the muffled roar of the wildfire outside seemed deadened further than before, as though the house was a vacuum of sound. My skin crawled, the air thick in my lungs, and a strange certainty took hold of me that made the sense of dread even worse as Cindy's words about Erin trickled through my brain. "She's gone." To my right, a doorknob at the far end of the hallway unlocked. Another lock slid open, this one closer, the doors remaining shut as more joined them one by one. A twinge of panic tightened in my throat, but I leveled the beam of my flashlight at the first door that had unlocked, blood surging in my temples. Everything seemed loud, the heartbeat in my chest, the breath in my lungs, the groan of the floorboards under my boots. My vision narrowed, a vibration hummed to life inside my skull, and I tasted metal on my tongue. In my hand, the flashlight began to flicker, as if the batteries were struggling to remain lit, and I couldn't lift the revolver, my arms refusing to move like the gun weighed as much as a car. The locks carried on past me, every door on the second story unlocking itself in a continuous march, until at last, the final click resounded from the far hallway like cannon fire to my ears. For a moment, the silence returned, so thick it may as well have been water. Every door on the second story flung open, impacting against the wall inside their respective rooms so hard that I heard plaster crunch, the hinges squealing on old dust. With them came the screams. There were hundreds of voices, some human, others less so, bellowing at the top of their lungs to be heard over one another. If they were saying any words, They were lost among the throng, a constant roar of vocals that soured in my ears for the sheer volume of it. Somewhere among the morass, I could barely catch the sound of Aaron and Cindy's voices shrieking with the others, a morbid choir of pain, suffering, and fear. It seemed to seep out of the floorboards, ooze from the heater vents, and rebound off the walls in every direction. With the doors open, the deep orange glow of the flames outside poured into the house like a tidal wave. But oddly enough, no heat came with it, the hallway as cold as if I'd stepped into a freezer. The shadows elongated in the firelight, swaying as they inched up the papered walls, and a pungent smell followed them. Roses. It came with overpowering strength, sickly sweet, but unmistakable. As the tide of shadows advanced down the hall toward me, the fermented stink of roses filled the air like poison gas, and I tasted copper on my lips. I have to get out of here. Coughing on the blood running from both nostrils, I stumbled toward the stairs, my head a mess of static. Like a tide of slithering vines, the inky shadows pursued me with ravenous hunger. I could feel their magnetic pull, the chorus of screams still ringing across the house with deafening volume, a terrible siren song that tugged at something deep within my subconscious. Voices, so many voices begged me to stay, to go back, to find the darkest room and sink myself into the abyss until it drowned me. Something tightened on my ankle just as I reached the top of the staircase, and I toppled headlong down the steps. My hip rammed into a banister, and I lost my grip on the pistol. Another step hit my shoulder, and I felt my teeth bite into my tongue, the flashlight clattering away into the floor below. My head connected with the floorboards at the landing, and the blackness threatened to close over my eyes for the last time. One of the steps flexed under the weight of a foot, and I gulped air in pain to squint at the shadows. Another footstep echoed toward me, something at the top of the steps descending with a slow, methodical gait. It didn't sound heavy, not the deft pace of a large man or a thick boot, but almost delicate, light, graceful. Yet there was something about each carefully placed step, each sigh and squeak of the aged woodwork that made my skin wriggle. Something was coming. Something that knew exactly where I was even in the pitch blackness of the house. It was watching me, stalking me through the shadows like a cat with a mouse. Desperate fear surged in my brain, and I clawed through the dark on my stomach to find a way out. I last remembered the front door being nearby, but it seemed to take an eternity to move across the cold floorboards, the unseen presence mere yards behind me, as I wriggled forward. At last I managed to gain my footing, though it hurt to put weight on my right leg, and hurled myself forward in the blind shadows. Both front doors flew open, and I tumbled out onto the porch, rolling down the steps into the stones of the walkway. Like a switch had been thrown, the world seemed to come alive once more, the cold sensation fading, the sound returning. Sirens wailed closer as headlights appeared in the long gravel driveway, and the crackle of flames roared from the trees. Smoke filled my nostrils. Heat from the nearby fire licked over my skin, and I rolled onto my side to look back toward the house. My lungs tightened, and I stared, unable to pull my eyes away. Inside the open front doorway, nothing was visible, not the glint of firelight from inside, nor the faint glow of it coming through any ground windows. The entrance was a mass of impenetrable shadows that seemed to form a solid wall at the threshold, yet deep within that abyss, something stared back. It had no shape, no form that I could identify it with, but there was definitely a presence that stood just beyond the light, watching me from the gloom. My eyes seemed fastened to it, either by my own primordial fear, or perhaps willed so by whatever peered out of the wretched expanse. A torrent of emotions ripped through my mind, warped and misshapen, like cold fingers pried at the taps of my humanity to unleash a maelstrom of feeling. Hunger and fear, hate and despair, lust and sadness, grief and pain. They all rolled over one another, tumbling in and out of each other in a never-ending tide, and it hit me with a strangled form of clarity that these weren't my emotions. Locked in place by the unknown being's gaze, I couldn't move, couldn't so much as cry out. My only option to fight back with what little expression I had left. "What are you?" Something about my terrified thoughts seemed to strike a chord within the cascade of terrible shadow. For the next instant, the doors on the house creaked in their wrought iron hinges, and then swung shut on their own. The rest of the night was a blur, a stupor, one that I wandered through in a mindless fog. Firefighting crews appeared from miles around to help put out the blaze, but not before it chewed through all 103 acres on the Wickenshire estate. Every tree, every bush, every blade of grass was burned to cinders. Even boulders cracked from the intense heat, the smoke pall so large it could be seen from Montana, or so I heard. One of the fire trucks exploded when its fuel tank caught fire and killed 3 men. Everything burned, except the house. For some reason, the fire stopped at the stone courtyard walls and went no further. In a blaze hot enough that it had turned some minor sand pits on the mountain to crude glass, there wasn't so much as a scorch mark on the house or its outbuildings. None of the paint peeled, the siding wasn't so much as warm to the touch, and all the plants within the yard were unscathed. The investigators couldn't even find ash on the roof from the fire afterwards, not a single flake. Unlike its ruined acreage, the Wickenshire house had survived the wildfire unharmed, and no one could make any sense of it. Once the fire was finally put out, they took me to the local clinic for my injuries, a sprained ankle, a dislocated shoulder, and a concussion from my tumble down the stairs. Sheriff Kowalski visited in the morning to see how I was, and to fill me in on what I'd missed once they trucked me away from the site. Over 300 search and rescue volunteers had been called out, along with special forensics teams from neighboring counties, and they hadn't found any sign of Cindy Fadro or Aaron Martinelli. The last time they managed to ping Cindy's phone via satellite, it had registered a mile up the slope from the house, but they never managed to recover the device. Tracking dogs refused to go near the house and seemed to lose all scent once they left the property boundaries. No trace of Aaron was discovered, and no DNA could be found in either of the girls' rooms to point to a culprit. One of the searchers claimed he had heard what sounded like a female voice screaming for help on the northern slope, but he wasn't sure where it had come from, and no one else could verify it. Another man claimed he saw someone walking inside the tree line near the eastern edge of the property, but never got a good glimpse at their face to see who they were. With all speculation bereft of evidence, it seemed to everyone that both Cindy and Aaron had disappeared from the face of the earth. Worse yet, when I described my account to the sheriff, he informed me that his team hadn't found any symbols painted on the walls, nor did they see anything out of the ordinary. All they found that aligned with my story was the strange, overwhelming aroma of roses that permeated the house. Nothing more. That was 6 weeks ago. I got out of the clinic within a few days after the event, but the continued search efforts proved fruitless. With their investigation coming up cold, the sheriff's office released the house back to Mr. Watkins, who closed it indefinitely. I had never seen him so distraught in my life, as Ed took the girl's disappearance rather hard. He felt personally responsible, though we all knew there wasn't anything he could have done, especially since no one knew what happened to Aaron or Cindy. However, Ed apparently decided to go there himself late one evening to do some looking around the house, and didn't bother to tell anyone else. It wasn't until his cleaning lady stopped by his cottage in Jacob's Fork the next morning that Ed was reported missing, and a police dispatched to the Wickenshire house. They never found him. His car was parked out front, the doors unlocked, but they couldn't find a trace of Edward Watkins anywhere on the property. I helped with the search, as I basically slept in the sheriff's office these days, and found no sign of a struggle or any other foul play. Only the smell of roses. We dug deep this time, rifled through local records, archives, property history, everything we could get our hands on about the estate. There was nothing to indicate this place would be trouble, no forgotten building plans with hidden rooms, no land disputes with older tenants, no tribal issues from burial grounds or holy sites. The property was normal, and even when I poked around to see if there had been any deaths, suicides, or other sordid affairs associated with the house, my search came up blank. There was no reason for this to be happen, not from human effort or anything else. Even now, as December drags on, nothing has been the same. No plants grow in the burned zone, not even the smallest patch of lichen or moss, as if the ground is poisoned to its core. Animals avoid it, so that the uncharted sections of forest around the property are empty, silent places. The access road is chained off to keep curious locals away, and Sheriff Kowalski let me bunk at a small ranger cabin at the base of the mountain just so I could keep tabs on the place. I think he knew I needed to be close, to keep an eye on the house and keep looking for answers. I can't explain why, but I know something is in there, waiting, biding its time. It failed to get me that night, but I have a terrible premonition that it doesn't need me, it just needs more. I found markers in the last few days, piles of bones. Not haphazard from an animal kill, but stacked, organized, purposeful. Bits of twine made from plant fibers hold them together, and despite being in the open, no animals will bother them, not even the vultures. Everyone thinks I'm crazy. They think I can't process the girls being gone, but I've stumbled on over a dozen of them now. They seem to be set in a wide ring around the property line, spanning outward from the house into the forest beyond, capturing more territory by the day. No matter how many times I remove them, the piles always reappear with fresh bones added to the stacks. I don't touch them anymore, and I don't even make eye contact with the empty eye sockets of the skulls. The few times I have, I heard whispers in my sleep, and had nightmares of eyes in the shadows of my room. Some of the bones are like those of a rabbit or mole, while others are bigger like elk or bear. Every pile is topped with a skull, most of them from small game, but 5 of the piles hold unique skulls: a bear, a coyote, an eagle, a snake, and lastly, a great bull elk. They are laid out opposite one another, ringing the house, the rest of the smaller markers ranging from them into the forest beyond. Of all the markers, the one with the elk skull is tallest, its full spread of antlers still intact, so that it is 9 feet high at the eye sockets. I found a symbol painted onto the bone forehead with powdered charcoal that the rain never seems to wash away, no matter how many times I go up to it. A spider, one made of 2 slender inverted hands, both the same size. I'm posting this so that it's on record, in case one of these days I don't come back from that mountain. Service was always spotty up there before, but ever since that night, it's been non-existent. Even the few trail cameras I've put out have either gone dead or produced nothing but blurry photos. Something is building these markers, watching me whenever I walk the perimeter, and shifting in the corners of my vision whenever I turn my head. I've discovered trail signs that have been purposefully moved to misdirect me. Sometimes I hear screams in the woods, distant and warped, but they sound like Aaron's cries. I see flashes of blonde hair in the bushes that I want to believe is Cindy, but I know it can't be. They're gone, both of them. Only the sheriff understands, even if he doesn't say much to that effect. I can see it in his eyes. He knows that I'm telling the truth, and his own deputies have been up to the house to see the piles multiple times. There's nothing they can do, nothing but wait from the valley below and hope that the snow buries whatever it is for the winter. There's something wrong with the Wickenshire house, something inside it, something unseen that walks the grounds day and night. It wants more than the estate. I can feel it, can taste it in the wind, hear it in the dry crunch of snow under my boots, and feel it in the shivers I get every time I look at the dark, barren windows of that cursed structure. It wants the forest, the trees, the mountain. It wants everything. Hello there. So I created a subreddit for sharing, writing, discussing, and recommending creepypasta and horror stories that you'd also like me to cover on the channel. Feel free to join the subreddit linked in the description. I'll be as active as possible there, checking out stories, discussions, recommendations, and interacting as much as I can. Let's grow a fun community. See you there.